Hello and welcome everyone to our webinar. Today we're going to show you all about test automation and about PaytestLab, and I'm very happy that you all joined from all over the world. With me is Nicole, our head of marketing, and I'm David, head of sales. And yeah, we just get going. So during the webinar, feel free to raise your questions in the Q&A section. We're going to answer them on the spot, or we're going to follow up afterwards if we can show it in the live demo. And we have a few polls coming up to get you engaged. So let's kick this off. Here we go. Good. PaytestLab. Before we dive too much into the presentation, I would like to understand my audience today a bit better. So I'm going to start a few polls, 3 of them, and I would like to ask you to vote on it. So the first one is to figure out what's your expertise around test automation so that I know on which level I need to go, how deep we go in, or if anyone is already an expert. This, I'll give you a few seconds of time so we get like 50% of the people at least to vote before we close it off. So, we got a few experts right now with us. Few of you haven't started with test automation yet. That's also good. If you join today, it's all about the basics and about our portfolio. And some of you are in the middle. So I'm gonna publish those results for you so you can take a look at it. Yeah, certainly we're gonna cover all the questions you have today. So a second one to start you off, what type of testings do you do? So what's the test you are looking for to automate? Are you in, this is multiple choice, by the way, so choose a couple of fields. Are you looking into regression testing, functionality, or EMV level 3 automation? And then we can also have a bit more focus around that in the webinar afterwards. A lot of regression testing and functionality testing. That's certainly something we cover today. And stress testing, not so much a need as it seems. And there's a big need for EMV level 3. We going to speak about that briefly today, but there's an in-depth webinar planned already for EMV level 3 automation. So I'm going to publish the results to you as well, so you can see what's on there. And my last poll before we start is about the challenge. What are your challenges today while you test? Again, this is multiple choice. So what's the biggest pain points you have? So I can also dive in on that. Is it the manual work you have to do, or is it card handling, accuracy and reporting of your tests, or overall is your test coverage just not where you expect it to be? That's a good mix of everything, huh? Manual work, yeah, mostly the manual work. That's understandable. It's a lot of effort, which we certainly can help you get resolved. So I'm going to publish those to you as well. You can have a look at what's the audience today. And then we get going. So here we are. PaytestLab. We are a company focusing on test automation. So we help you to automate your payment software testing. Our headquarter of PaytestLab is in Switzerland, and we have an office in the US, and our production is based in Slovenia, where we manufacture also our robotics. Our goal is to become the industry leader. So we want to set the standards how test automation is being done and being executed. And it's very good to have you all on board at this early stage and to really dive into test automation with you all today. We're going to have 3 different focus areas within PaytestLab where we can help you to get you automated. So the first one is we can help you with in-house testing, meaning we enable you by providing hardware and software to your factory or to your Q&A department so that you can test in-house by yourself. However, if you need support from PaytestLab, be it in writing your test cases or spinning up additional robots to outsource some of your testing, then we are here for you, and we call that hybrid testing approaches. So you can have some of the hardware on site, but some could be temporarily or permanently hosted from PaytestLab in our own labs. And if you say, hey, testing is way too much trouble, we don't have the resource at all, then you can outsource the complete testing process to PaytestLab, and we can do for you full certifications or regression testing and really help you to not worry at all about testing, but just about the good software quality, which you will have at the end of the day. In the space of payment testing, there's always the same challenge. So we've seen on the poll just now that you all are pretty similar and pretty close to the challenge. And the same challenge we experience as well. And that's why we came up with payment testing at all. So the major challenge which we are all facing is the manual testing. It's just a lot of work to test the certification. You have to do all the manual PIN entry and the card entry. And this is just time consuming, and nobody wants to spend that much resource on a process which can be automated. So we are here to reduce your workload with robotics. Then another huge pain point is always the card handling. So if you need to do a regression test, you also need to use different test cards. And it can easily happen that you mix up those test cards, or you misplace them, or you need to share them on different teams. And that's just not so easy to do. So we developed our PayTest multiplexers, in which you store the physical card and then pick up the signal by a probe, which is installed on the robot for testing itself. Then an issue which we were facing was the reporting and the handling of all the test cases which we created. I'm often speaking with my prospects and they tell me that they have stored everything in Excel in a spreadsheet, and this is just not how you can do automation today. So we developed a test framework called PaytestHub, and in there we manage all our hardware components, but we also write all the test cases and do the reporting and debugging of our software all online in the cloud. So that's the main part, what you will see today in the demo afterwards. I'm going to show you how PaytestHub works. And the latest issue which we were challenged with and could resolve, payment terminals are just getting bigger and bigger, and they didn't fit in our Paytest Robot T1 anymore. So we developed Paytest Robot T4, which can host up to 4 payment terminals on one robot. This gives you a much higher flexibility also in scaling. So for example, if you want to have one card arm at the beginning and one payment terminal, you can easily add just a second card arm and a base plate and then test 2 terminals at a time. Or also you could add an iPhone or an iPad and then test your mobile payment device against a physical payment device. So tap on device could be possible to achieve with just one hardware. Now, if you get into test automation, don't expect that you buy the hardware and the software and you're done on the next day. So this will be a continuous journey, and you will start with the easiest test case and then on the go automate more and more test cases until you achieve your desired test coverage. How do we do this? We've got 3 major components here. We've got PaytestHub, which is hosted in the cloud, and through our Paytest API communicates with our Paytest robot and the Paytest MUX to do the test automation. So let's dive in on those 3 products a bit deeper. PaytestHub is our cloud-native test framework, which is powering your test automation and gives you remote accessibility to your robot, meaning you can share one instance of PaytestHub with your team, and they can be in the same building but on different levels, or they can be absolutely remote. Like I'm today at my home office in Lucerne, but the robot I'm showing you afterwards is in our office in Zurich, so that's 1 hour away. But I can simply log into PaytestHub and run that robot remotely. So this is a huge USP, because then your teams don't always need to be on site, or if they have different locations, you can share the resources together. Then we got 2 robots available. On the left, you see an illustration of the Paytest Robot T1, and on the right, it's Paytest Robot T4. The main difference you see is the size of the robot, but also the robot T4 is slightly faster than the robot T1 if you compare it in a one-to-one setup. And Paytest Robot T4 gives you the flexibility in raising the whole plate of the robot so that you can test terminals which have buttons on different levels as well. The finger is a bit longer than on the T1, and therefore you have more flexibility in playing around with your setup. We've got three multiplexers in our portfolio. So we got a contact and contactless multiplexer separately, and we have a combined multiplexer which can have dual interface cards in it and is connected with two probes. So this is obviously an advantage because then you only need to have one set of test cards. You don't need to have two of them, and it's easy for you to manage and maintain that setup as well. Now, a bit on the architecture. So we got you all covered. Everything you need for your payment testing can be supported by PayTest Hub and also by PaytestLab. So through our PayTest API, we connect to our own hardware, but also to third-party software like Android Debug Bridge or different EMV level 3 test tools, which are out there in the market as well. And it's also possible to have customized extensions. Let's say you have a specific third-party hardware which you would like to integrate, or you have a specific software where you need to report to. Those could be integrated as a custom extension. So taking a bit of a look at the EMV level 3 testing, and that many of you were interested, I would like to start a poll and find out, again, this is multiple choice, what's the tool you're currently using for your EMV level 3 certification? All right, that's UL and ICC mostly, then a bit of theme and very little other, which, yeah, is a good market coverage. So we gonna focus on that in a second webinar. I'm gonna take that certainly up and make sure that you are all notified which use any test tools. And then we're gonna dive on the EMV level 3 testing in a follow-up webinar, mostly voted for you all here. I'm gonna publish that for you all to see. Good. Let me give you some examples how we challenged our own status internally and could improve our testing. So one big improvement we've done is the 5,000 transactions in a raw stress test. What have we done? We took a bunch of different terminals, spin them up on the robot T1, and then executed 5,000 times exactly the same transaction. Now, this is a huge stress test which we have done, and none of those terminals passed that stress test. So we found a lot of bugs in our own software, which we developed, but also in third-party software, which we then could feed back to the manufacturers of the terminals to improve the overall software quality. This was a huge improvement for us and for the external suppliers. Just got a question in the QA end. Let me read that. Is the PayTest API open to use to create your own application? You can integrate the PayTest API. So the question is the PayTest API open to use to create your own application to use the robots? To some extent, yes. So the PayTest API can be integrated also into third-party software. So we have integrations achieved with TestRail, Selenium, Espresso, Eggplant. This is all possible to do. So if you already use a test framework, it's not necessary to use PayTest Hub as your test framework, but you have to choose. You can't use two software environments. You need to have one where you orchestrate all your test cases in it. Then a second use case I want to highlight to you, and it's also going to be a question certainly afterwards, and it's the performance of the robot. It's a bit hard to compare a human being with a robot, but let's just assume that we have to go through a test cycle with 800 tests, and you have a human which is able to do 25 tests per hour. So that would lead to a lead time of 32 hours for your release. Now, this doesn't include any breaks or yeah, reruns or something like that. And on the other side, if we would use a PayTest Robot T1 or a T4, the capacity is around 80 to 100 tests. This always depends a bit on how many test steps you have in your test case. But on average, it will take you somewhere around 10 to 6 hours to wrap this scenario up. So what we done internally, or Abrantix is now doing, it's Abrantix is a developer of software for Ingenico Worldline in Switzerland, and Abrantix is using our robots to test the software every night. So how does that work? The developers, before they go home, they upload the latest firmware onto 6 different robots, and they run between 5 to 600 tests every night. And the first thing in the morning where they come in, they go through the report in PaytestLab and see if there's any unusual behavior with the software, meaning have they created any bug on the previous day? And if so, they first do a debug and then a rerun of those tests which failed to make sure that there's no um, bug developed into the software. So this is continuous integration and development, which we do, and helps to release, shorten the release cycles from 6 months to only 1 month. So it's a huge improvement in terms of um, performance and release cycle time. There's a second question coming in. How does PayTest work with touchscreen? So we're going to look at that afterwards. You will see that in the live demo, how we can interact with a touchscreen. It's going to be done on a Castle Saturn 1000, which is a touchscreen POS device. All right, let me sum up what you've just seen in the presentation before we hop over to the live demo. So we are here to help you execute way more tests in a higher accuracy and also more speed. We shorten therefore the release cycle time, and this helps to improve the customer satisfaction, as you can just have a way better test coverage by reducing your workload for physical testing to write more tests at the end of the day. So this overall reduces the cost and for manual testing, but it improves the test coverage and your release cycle. All right, so what's come next? I'm gonna move over to the live demo, and in there you will see PaytestLab and how we execute tests, a regression test on a Castle's terminal. And yeah, if you have questions on the product, just drop them in the chat and I'm gonna answer them on the spot for you. Good. There's 2 more questions coming in. How do you manage parallel test execution? That's I'm going to highlight to you afterwards once we started the test running. And the other one, how do you select different cards out of the multiplexer? Also a good question, which I'm going to highlight to you in a second. So this is PaytestLab, and you see I'm currently logged into the demo environment. So this is our tenant specifically for demos. Each of our customers has their own tenant, meaning you can't see what everyone else is doing, and you can manage all the users which can access your environment. So I've got the possibility to change my password or my personal information. And on the main page, I got a very handy agent review available. So in here, I can see which environments are online and which components might be offline. So I have a very good overview about my environments. Other than that, I have on the left side the menu where I can navigate through the different menu sections. And in the middle, there's the main overview of all the agents which are installed. So the agent is the PayTest API installed on a local computer, and that manages all the hardware component there. So we're going to dive into the demo Zurich environment. That's the one we're going to use afterwards. And here we got a castles environment. So to this environment, we have connected different extensions. In that setup, we use ADB for testing, but also for screen capturing. We got a contact and contactless multiplexer. We've got OCR enabled to see the display. We got communication with the EP2 gateway. So that's a gateway specific used in Switzerland. We have the robot, a second OCR used for demo purpose, and the 6ML extension also specific to Switzerland. So if I'm going here on the display, we can then see a highlight of the OCR capturing the screen. So why do we do this? This is necessary to include into test automation because some of your screens will be locked, meaning you can't access them with ADB. And to proceed through the automation steps, you need to make sure that your terminal is at the right task. And then We capture the screen and we read it, and therefore the PaytestLab test case knows then when to proceed forward. You will see that afterwards as well in the test setup. Other than that, in here I could set up which terminal I'm currently using. So if I would use something else, I just change the terminal type to the right terminal I have on my robot, and then the robot knows where to go with the finger, where to press the buttons. So then let's look at how we're gonna write a test case. I'm gonna pick one which is here, pre-written. Good. This is a test case which we made for an Ingenico terminal supported with B2 software. So if I'm going into the edit mode, I can show you how this is done. We got two different ways how you can write a test case. You can either write it in here in a tree overview with our user interface, or you can write it in a script type. Both is based on XML language, and it's rather simple to do. So you can just add an automation step to it. You say which target you want to address. So PEM will be my pin entry machine, the robot, and the command is insert, and then you choose this to be a text version, depends on your environment setup. You add it as an automation step, and it will be at the, sorry, here, insert, then there's the automation step added. So writing your initial test cases, if you haven't done it before, it might be a bit of a try and error. And it takes you around 20 to 30 minutes to write your first test case. But afterwards, when you write more and more test cases, you get faster and faster. And it's also simply possible by just copy and pasting the whole test case and then just changing some of the parameters. Now, we got the question, how do we select different cards out of the multiplexer? So there's a simple way how we can do this. We can define the slots which we want to use in a test case, either by defining it as a variable, which gives us a better flexibility in changing that value as well. So we could name this name card multiplexer port number 2, 3, 4, 5, and then just change the variable of which slots you want to pick afterwards, instead of writing it directly in your test case in here. So instead of writing slot number 2, you give it a specific name, and then all your test cases will automatically update. The same could done with variables, for example, also for the PIN or the transaction amount. So that makes it easier for you to maintain all your test cases as well. So once you have written all your test cases, you can bundle them together in test sets. Now we got a test set here for the Castles terminal, and this is a regression test set which we use. So it consists of 59 different tests. We start with some basic transactions. So we have credit, contact, contactless with PIN, without PIN. We got some account verification, which we do. There's some cash in advance, balance inquiries, and then reservations, but also refunds. So there's no limitation to what you can test. It's basically just your imagination, what kind of test cases you would like to write. Obviously, we can help you with that and provide you with ideas, or we can look at your test cases and help you to improve them and write more and get you a really good test coverage there. So I'm gonna run this test set on my agent in Zurich and on the Castles terminal. And then we see that the robot automatically starts. Click on live stream. I give you the probe view. And then we can have a look at the robot doing its magic. So there's a few more questions in the chat. One is, how would we enable the automation of the UL test tool or the ICC test tool? So we have something which we call the EMV Level 3 player, which is an add-on to PaytestLab, and this add-on includes both also the automation module for ICC or for UL. So this is not something you need to worry about then. It's something which we can provide you as a part of the setup. Then we got the question, how do we manage parallel test execution? So in this setup, it's a robot T1. I can't show you how we test in parallel because the robot will just test one after another, but I can show you how we do put something in a queue. So I can simply restart the same test and then add it in the queue of my test environment. And therefore you could plan your test scenario. So now we see this is the test which is running, and there's a second one now in the queue. And as soon as this one is finished, that one will continue. Now on the robot T4, this is done concurrently. So if you would start test cases on two different terminals, the robot just goes round and about and executes all the test steps depending on what's next. So if it needs to insert a card, it will insert the card, and then this terminal will be busy with accepting the payment transaction, and then the robot moves to another terminal, enters the PIN, and so one resource is shared on 4 different terminals. Let's look a bit at what's happening right now. So first of all, on the left, you see, again, this is my test set, including the 59 different test cases. And we finished one test case, and it's doing the second one right now. In the middle, I've got an overview of all the test steps which are involved in this test case. And on the right side, we receive the log information from the different sources which are connected in this environment. Also, we are able to capture the screen. This is done with ADB or with OCR, depending on your setup. And this can be a proof of work, so that if you have to prove that the screen was captured at a specific task, you can do so simply by writing the command. Let me see where it is. Here, in this case, ADB, execute action, capture screen, and then you got a screen capturing. Also, we are able to pull in the receipts from ADB directly, or with OCR. If you don't have ADB, we can capture the receipt with ODR and store it in your test case. This is then, again, very handy. So you can also do validation of information which is actually printed, and could also be handed in then for your certification afterwards. Okay, so let me see, there are a few more questions. Oh, there's a lot of more questions. What if the test will fail in the middle of execution? Do you have something like after each steps to roll back terminal to the initial stage of execution? So this was happening right here. So the test failed, and this is not a big problem because the robot after the test case will always go back into an idle mode and go back to the home position, which is down here on the XY coordinate 0 of your terminal. And if a test case fails, it just goes back and then continues with the next test. So all those test steps have not been run, but you see that the next test cases then were successful again. Which scripting language are supported for writing test cases? If someone writes a test case using the free view appears to be no code, can it be edited, viewed in the actual scripting language? So we write in a basic XML language in our scripts. You can edit it then in this tree overview afterwards if you want to edit your test cases, but the basic scripting language is done with XML. Now, let me show you what we can do once the test cases are completed. So we see this is still ongoing. So I'm going to choose one which has been concluded previously. We got quite an extensive list of tests being completed. So that's 1,687 tests run, which we have done. And I can click on finish test run and then see on top there's a brief summary. So 42 test cases have been successful. 17 failed, and that took us half an hour to complete. Now, how would I do the debugging? I could go to the failed test cases, click on that specific um, step, and then see from the different logs what was the failure. And that way I'm able, if I'm see the same test case fails always at the same step, I'm able to do the debugging and find the issue. And also with the capturing of the screen, it helps me to validate what was happening during that specific process and how could I do it better the next time. So all test runs are automatically coming with a PDF report which we generate. So I'm just clicking on PDF. It's creating that report, and you will have it right now. It's 147 pages. Gives you a summary of the test report which has been built. So there's a table of content. There's a run summary with pass and fail. And then there's a summary of each and every test case, including the test steps. So what we have planned going forward as well is to add the receipts into those reports or pictures which you have taken so that everything is placed in one file. And you could hand this in then as, if you do regression testing, as a release note for a proof that you have actually tested the software. Okay. I'll go back to the live stream and answer a few more questions which are in the chat. Where does the stream come from? Good question. So there, in this setup, we have three different streams, sorry. We got once the display view. That's a camera which is connected with OCR and is capturing the display. And we got another physical camera which is capturing the probe view, like we call it. So this second view is not really necessary for you to have. I use it for demo purpose so people can see how the robot finger is going around and pressing buttons. And that stream which you see here, this is the stream from the Android terminal itself, which we receive over ADB, so the Android debug bridge. This gives you a live stream functionality of your terminal, and you can see what's happening on your terminal right now. And the 6ML stream, which we have here, this is something very specific for Switzerland. We were part of the development of this 6ML protocol. So we can basically show what's happening, what would the ECR see right now in this specific scenario. But that's a bit unique to our use cases in Switzerland. More important for you is the probe view or the display view and the ADB live stream. Are you able to save a picture from the screen? Yes, we are able to save pictures from the screen. So as mentioned, we can do screenshot recordings. If it's just a capture picture, let me see if that's set up. In this case, it's not. So again, in here, we got, let me see. Here, execute action capture screen. So this is possible with the ADB extension, but also with the OCR extension. Those pictures are stored then in a small size online, but if you want to have it in higher resolution, we recommend to store the picture offline on a server on a local drive or something, because the data volume is just going to explode if you capture a picture after every test step and it's full resolution, then yeah, the hosting costs will just explode. So we always recommend to do that offline. Is there an API to trigger the PayTest robot portion of my test, since I need to finish the rest of the end-to-end test in my current Selenium setup? Okay, good question. So if you would have a third-party software like Selenium, Espresso, or something else, you would write all your test case in Selenium and then communicate through the PayTest API with our robot. Meaning we got the API documentation right here. And then there's specific commands which you need to address so that our robot is following the execution steps. So those codes or lines need to be then included in your Selenium extension. And there's then everything um, in it which you need to know. The commands for actually running a test case are then down here on the 6ML. So if you want to cancel a transaction, you would need to write execute action cancel, and therefore need to update that in your Selenium test cases to make them possible for automation. Something I want to highlight to you as well in the API documentation is the list of the supported terminals. We currently support around 70 different terminals from different manufacturers. Um, what's happening here is if there's a terminal which is not supported, we need that terminal physically in Slovenia to create a base plate. Then we create the base plate which is unique to that terminal, so it's nicely fixed on the robot, but we also map the basic functionality of the terminal. So we map where's X, Y, 0, so the bottom left corner of your terminal, and where's the major buttons on your software as well. So where's menu, where's 1, 2, 3, and this is then integrated into the API. So everyone which uses the API from us and the robots can then just say, I have this Verifone M400 terminal, and the robot knows exactly where it has to go. Obviously, if you change your user interface or you have a different software and your buttons are on a different place, you will need to recalibrate the layout. Or if you use an Android terminal, you don't work with coordinates, you simply work with ADB and tell it where you want to press. So if you want to start a purchase transaction and on the display there's the button purchase, the robot will go to purchase if you tell it so. That's then way easier to test with Android terminals afterwards. Uh, Parallel execution. Let me pull up a video for you to show how we will do parallel execution. Com. So here, contactless wallet. So in this setup, this was done at NRF in New York. So we got the robot T4. There are 4 terminals on it. And what the robot is doing, it's testing 2 terminals in concurrently. So this is iPhone, which we test mobile applications, wallets. And on the other hand, there's a Verifone terminal, which is being calibrated in this situation. So if you watch closely, the robot will enter the pin over here. And once it's finished, the card will be entered here and the finger moves from one robot to another. So this would be then what we call concurrent testing, so that the robot shares the resources with the different terminals and or phones which are set up on your robot. So you start test runs on all 4 devices, and then the robot goes round and about and does the testing depending on the test step it's at. Um, so there's a question about how the contactless cards work in the multiplexer. This is something I can highlight to you as well in that video right here. All right. So we got here on the desk a setup with a combined multiplexer, a contact and a contactless multiplexer. Now those multiplexers are connected with the probes. So in a test, when you want to do a contact or a contactless transaction, we simply activate this probe with the slot according from the multiplexer, and then the signal is picked up from a reader and placed on this card and inserted for the test, and afterwards it's deactivated. So there's no data stored during your test, after the test is completed. So the data is only stored on the physical cards and is then spied and sent onto the probe. The same goes for contactless. So the difference here is that the contactless card, which you see here, is fixedly installed with this card holder. So there's no need for a physical arm to move the card in and out. This card only has a signal during the test case when you say activate slot number 1, then this car picks up the signal and afterwards it's not active anymore. Let me go back to our test run so we see where we are. So there's a question about the report functionality as well. Currently, the reports are available only in the PDF format. We plan to have also a Jira integration so that you can send the test report to different tools, or that we have a Slack integration as well so that you get a notification in your Teams channel, hey, the test case has been finished. Please go and check your results and stuff like that. But this is on our roadmap. It's currently not an implemented feature and functionality. On storing our test data, we currently do so for 3 months of time. So the retention period is 3 months, and afterwards the data is being deleted. So if you would need to have it for a longer time, you would need to store it offline in PDF reports, but that's something which could be discussed individually as well if there's other requirements. There's a good question on how to build a test case. So do you have to put time delays between screens so the robot knows when to action the next step? Yes and no. So this depends a bit on your test case setup. So here we have some timeout delays set. So as we test with an Android terminal, we always know where the terminal is because we can read the screen and we know exactly what's happening in that specific moment. So as soon as the Android terminal tells us, hey, I finished a specific step, then we can continue with the next one. If you have a terminal which is not Android enabled, we will build in delays. So instead of timeout, you would write delay after a specific test step. So delay for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, a minute, whatever you prefer. And then the robot waits with the next interaction to continue with the next test step. Obviously, timeout and delay is also a good way for you to do specific debugging or finding of issues, because if you set here on the pin entry event screen, we have a timeout of 30 seconds. And it's happening from time to time that this specific Castle's firmware has longer than 30 seconds to load the pin entry screen. And this could be then validated in a stress test scenario where you run 1,000 tests and you specifically focus on this 30 seconds to see how often such an event is happening. So with delay or with a timeout, you're able to do such scenarios. So there's a question on if we provide hosting as well in our own office. That's something which we support. So if you are not currently not able to host your own environment, you can send us your terminals. We can spin up robots in Slovenia for you or in Canada, and then you access your robots remotely like I do right now. So you would have your own tenant, and in there's your terminal with your test cases, and you go in and you run the tests, or you just see at the summary while we run the test for you. So a remote test up setup would build that way. That was a lot of questions. A few of them I'm going to answer afterwards because they're very specific and technical, but I'll make sure to not miss out on any of your questions. All right. Um, are there any more questions coming through the chat? Otherwise, we got 5 minutes left for this webinar today. There's a couple of questions about pricing. I'm going to share pricing afterwards with you individually. That's something we can address in a follow-up. If not, if there's no more questions coming in, I've got one more poll for you. I would like to know about your interest for the next webinar, which we are planning to do. So again, this is multiple choice. Let me know in which topics you are interested from PaytestLab to learn. So what would you like to see in the future, where we plan to do this maybe every 6 weeks, maybe once a month, depending on your interest. So give it some thoughts right there and let me know what you are looking for to learn next. There's a lot of interest around EMV level 3 certification. We're gonna make sure to follow up on that as well. There's a brief video on YouTube which you can watch. If you go to our YouTube channel, make sure to subscribe as well and not miss out on any recordings. Overall, it looks like regression testing is a bit more of a focus. We can dive into that a bit deeper, also how a specific test case is written, then roadmap and features. That's something which we certainly will inform about as well. And a fully integrated solution is also a very interesting topic, which we collaborate on with some partners. So we can also highlight this in another, and there's somebody looking on others. All right, let me see the questions. I need to change my application being tested. That's a good one. If you have different payment applications on your robot, what you could do is write a test case, which is basically initializing your terminal setup. So you could set up a specific um, protocol type or software which you're currently running, or you can change between two softwares on the one terminal by simply navigating to the home button, to the menu, and then building a way how you can set up a different software also remotely, so that you will put this then at the beginning of your test set to initialize your terminal for this specific test run if you test two different applications, but that's something which you can manage. Does the robot allow direct manipulation of the touch probe in real time, manual mode? Yes, that's also possible to do. If we go into the environment, again, I can't do it right now because the robot is running, but you can interact with the terminal configuration here and, for example, insert or eject the probe, and then it's inserted or ejected. Also, with the ADB extension in the setup itself, you can interact with this screen if you are in the setup mode in the settings, and then you can click all the buttons so you see only available in edit mode, and therefore you can also set up your terminal for specific use cases if you want to change something remotely on your software. Great. I think we're gonna wrap it up here. I appreciate your interest in our product and software solutions. Make sure to watch your inbox tomorrow. We're gonna share the recording with you, which is uploaded on YouTube. And yeah, then let's stay in touch. Connect with us on LinkedIn, and we're gonna host the next webinar then in March. Thanks for joining. Have a good evening or morning.